Hi there. You're watching Reddit Confessions, where secrets don't stay buried, and every silence has a story. Let's just say, if I hadn't walked into the kitchen at 3:07 a.m. for a glass of water, I'd probably still be living in a lie. She didn't hear me come in, but I heard everything. She was on the phone, barefoot, pacing slowly between the fridge and the sink. I could see her reflection in the dark window above the counter. Tense shoulders, half-whispered words, her hand nervously twirling the cord of her robe. "Don't worry," she said. "He doesn't suspect anything." My hand tightened around the glass. Not out of rage, I don't do rage. I do confusion. Hurt. A quiet kind of collapse, the kind that folds you inward until you question if you even heard it right. I didn't barge in. I backed away, slowly, sat on the stairs, waited for her to hang up, and when she finally came to bed, I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, I made coffee like nothing happened. She kissed my cheek, said she had to run. Something about helping a friend prepare for a presentation. Said it casually, like I hadn't heard her promising someone else that I was clueless. I spent the whole day staring at our kitchen window, at the exact reflection where her secrets leaked out. I kept asking myself, was I being dramatic? Overthinking? Maybe it was her sister. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe it was nothing. But that night I checked our shared iPad. Not to snoop, just to feel sane. The messages weren't hidden. They weren't even deleted. Just sitting there. He asked if I was with you. I said yes, faced with tears of joy. "You're such a bad liar, babe. At least I'm not boring like him." I remember sitting on the floor, back against the dishwasher, as the cold air from the open fridge touched my legs. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just kept rereading that one part. At least I'm not boring like him. The next day, I confronted her. Calmly, I asked who she'd really been with. Her eyes widened, not with guilt, but with irritation. Like I'd inconvenienced her. "It was Finn," she said. "And nothing happened. He's just a friend. And honestly, he makes more sense than you. You always twist things. At least he listens." I was shaking, not from anger, from the weight of realizing she wasn't even sorry. Not even trying to deny it in full. So I asked, "Are you seriously taking his side right now?" And she said it. "Yes, because you blow everything out of proportion." That was the moment. The tilt. The snap. The quiet break. So I said the words that ended everything. Not loud. Not cruel. Just enough. "Then maybe you should see how far his side takes you." She blinked. She laughed. A dry, confused laugh like I was bluffing. I wasn't. And that was the night everything changed. She didn't follow me. That's what stuck with me the most. After I said those words, "Then maybe you should see how far his side takes you." She just stood there. Not a tear. Not even a hint of hesitation. It was like I gave her the out she'd been waiting for. And instead of guilt, she looked relieved. The next few days were a blur of silent mornings and fake smiles. She still made smoothies like clockwork. Still folded laundry like it mattered. But she didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask if I meant what I said. And I didn't ask if she was still seeing him. We just moved through the house like polite strangers wearing wedding rings out of habit. But on Thursday, it all exploded. I came home from work early. I was going to be the bigger person, have a conversation, lay everything out. Try one last time to make sense of the wreckage. I even stopped at that bakery she likes and picked up those almond croissants she always devours. Some sad part of me thought maybe that'd soften her. Make her remember we were us before him. When I walked in, I heard music. Her speaker playing that god-awful indie playlist she always said helped her focus. I smiled, dumbly. I thought maybe she was finally writing again or painting, or doing something that reminded her of who she was before Elias came around. But then I saw the shoes. Men's boots, kicked off carelessly by the front door. Not mine. I didn't call out. I just walked in one step at a time like my body had already decided I needed to see it for myself. No guessing, no assumptions. She was in the kitchen, laughing. He was leaning against the island, sipping from my mug, like he lived there, like this was his home now. My wife was in leggings and a hoodie I hadn't seen before, barefoot again, always barefoot when she felt comfortable. And oh, she looked comfortable. When she saw me, she didn't flinch, didn't jump, just casually said, "Oh, you're home." Elias turned slowly, like I was the guest, not the husband. He nodded. "Hey, man." I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just set the box of croissants on the counter like an idiot and said, "You couldn't wait until I left?" She rolled her eyes. "It's not like that." But it was exactly like that. She said they were just talking, that it wasn't planned, that I was blowing things up again. But then Elias had the nerve to speak. He said, "Look, Carter, I get it. But maybe if you actually saw her, really saw her, you'd understand why she felt alone." And that's when I finally broke. Not in rage. Not even in heartbreak. In something colder. I looked at her, at him, then back at her. "I hope he writes you poems," I said. "Because I'm done trying to make sense of someone who only sees me as the villain in her story." Then I walked upstairs, grabbed a backpack, stuffed it with whatever I could grab in 2 minutes, and left. No big goodbye. No dramatic slam of the door. Just silence. She didn't follow me then, either. The first night away from home didn't feel real. I crashed at a cheap roadside inn, the kind with dim lighting and a stale smell that clung to the sheets. The TV kept playing reruns of some crime show, but I couldn't pay attention. I just sat there, staring at the wall, still hearing his voice in my head. "Maybe if you actually saw her." As if I hadn't spent years trying to. As if I hadn't memorized the sound of her breathing, or the way she tapped her fingers against the steering wheel when she was anxious. Around 2 a.m., I drove back to the house. Not to talk. Not to confront. I just needed to grab the rest of my stuff. Some clothes, my laptop, my old journals. I didn't even care if she was there. I just didn't want to feel like a ghost in my own life. The lights were off when I arrived. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Maybe she was with him. Maybe they were already laughing about how overdramatic I'd been. I didn't care. I told myself I didn't care. I walked in and went straight to the bedroom. The bed was unmade. My side was still dented. That alone nearly sent me spiraling. But I focused. I grabbed a duffel bag and started shoving things in. Shirts, chargers, socks. I reached for the drawer on her side of the bed just to check for any of my stuff. That's when I found it. A folded envelope with no name, sealed but already slightly torn at the corner. Curious, I opened it. It wasn't addressed to anyone, just a series of scribbled paragraphs. Half diary, half confession. She'd written about me, about him, about how she didn't plan it, how it started with emotional conversations and slowly turned into something I couldn't undo. She wrote that she felt invisible around me, like I always meant well but never asked the right questions. That Elias made her feel like a person again, while I, her husband, made her feel like a task. But what gutted me most was one line near the bottom. "If Carter ever finds this, I hope he knows I did love him." I just stopped knowing how. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, letter in hand, heart caught between rage and devastation. She had loved me, or at least told herself she did. And now I was reduced to a forgotten drawer and a crumpled note not meant for my eyes. I thought about texting her, about asking where she was, about demanding some form of clarity. But what would that even do? Give her the satisfaction of knowing I still cared? I took a photo of the letter, left the original right where I found it. Then I zipped my bag, walked out, and closed the door behind me. Gently this time. No slamming. Just a soft, final goodbye to the house that once felt like home. It wasn't over, not really. But a piece of me stayed in that drawer. Folded. Unfinished. And she still had no idea I'd seen it. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. I hadn't slept. I was still in the same hoodie, lying on the stiff mattress of the motel bed, staring at the ceiling like it might answer questions she never would. I knew it was her before I even looked. I don't know how, you just know when someone presses send with detachment instead of remorse. Her message read, "Please don't make this harder than it has to be. I'll pack your remaining things and leave them on the porch." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Can we talk?" Just cold efficiency. Like I was a broken lease. I stared at that text until the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. I didn't scream. I just let it sit there. She had already replaced our years together with logistical planning. The woman who once cried watching dog adoption videos with me had turned into someone who wanted me gone like I was some chore she forgot to finish. Around noon, I finally drove back. I didn't want to. I hated that I did, but I needed to see. Not her. Just the porch. When I got there, 2 boxes sat neatly stacked by the door. One was labeled clothes, the other miscellaneous. In her handwriting. The same handwriting from the letter I'd found the night before. I didn't take the boxes right away. I just stood there for a while, hands in my pockets, hoping the door would open, hoping she'd look at me even once. But she didn't. The house was quiet. Still. Like I'd never lived there at all. When I turned to leave, I noticed a padded envelope tucked between the boxes. No label. Just sealed. Curiosity got the better of me, and I wish it hadn't. Inside was my journal. Not the one I kept on my phone. Not the one she knew about. The real one. The black leather notebook I kept hidden behind my old books, where I wrote everything. The nights I felt invisible. The days she smiled at texts that weren't for me. The dreams I gave up just to keep us steady. She must have found it. Read it. Then decided it belonged in the pile of miscellaneous. I flipped through it right there on the porch, heart pounding like it was trying to stop me. Page after page of raw thoughts, pain, questions. She had marked one entry with a small folded corner. A night from 3 months ago. She laughed at something on her phone and turned away from me in bed. I asked what it was. She said, "Just memes." I smiled, but something in me died. I don't think she lies maliciously. I think she just lies to protect the version of me she stopped loving. I didn't remember writing it, but it hit like a brick. She read that. She folded it. And still she let me walk out. The truth wasn't just that she betrayed me. It was that my pain meant so little, she could categorize it, organize it, and leave it on a porch like yesterday's mail. I put everything in my trunk. Drove off without looking back. But 20 minutes later, I pulled into a parking lot and cried for the first time since it all began. Not the cinematic kind, just the quiet, exhausted kind. The kind where the tears come not from what you lost, but from realizing someone you loved watched you break and didn't flinch. I still hadn't told anyone. No friends, no family, no explanation. Just disappeared from my own life. But all of that was about to change. Because 3 days later, someone knocked on my motel room door. And it wasn't her. When the knock came, I thought it was the motel manager. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Barely left the room except to grab coffee and stare at it until it went cold. So when I opened the door and saw him standing there, Elias of all people, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. He was holding a folder. Manila. Worn. Like it had been handled 100 times before it got to me. I didn't say a word. Just stared. "I thought you deserved to know," he said, eyes low. No smugness. No smug grin. He looked exhausted. Pale. Like he hadn't slept either. "Can I come in?" Every part of me wanted to slam the door. But I stepped aside. Maybe out of shock. Maybe because I needed to know what game he was playing. He sat on the edge of the chair near the window and placed the folder on the nightstand. I stood across from him, arms crossed, back against the door. "I'm not here to defend myself," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. Something happened, and you need to see this." I didn't respond. I didn't trust my voice. He opened the folder and pulled out a series of printed messages. Screenshots, email logs. My stomach turned. His name was at the top of most of them. But they weren't from Jenna. They were from someone else, Talia, Jenna's friend from the art center. Someone I barely knew. Someone who always seemed sweet and harmless. The messages weren't just flirty. They were calculated, descriptive, manipulative. Talia had been orchestrating things between them, pushing them together. Phrases like, "She needs someone deeper than him," and "make her feel safe. That's all it takes." I couldn't believe what I was reading. I looked up. Elias was watching me, tense. It wasn't supposed to go that far. At first, I thought she just needed someone to talk to. But Talia kept feeding it, feeding her doubts about you, and then about me. It was like some twisted social experiment. I blinked, heart racing. You're saying Jenna was, what, manipulated into cheating? He didn't answer directly. I don't know what she really felt, but I know Talia wanted this to happen. She played both sides. She told Jenna lies about you, and told me that Jenna was unhappy. And I believed it. We both did. I paced the room, trying to breathe. It didn't excuse what Jenna had done. Not even close. But suddenly, the cracks in our marriage had fingerprints I hadn't seen before. Outside fingerprints. Why are you telling me this now? I finally asked. Elias hesitated. Because she turned on me too. Said I'd manipulated her. She's blocked me. Cut me off. And now Talia's saying I was the one who ruined everything. I guess it took losing everything to realize how wrong it all was. He stood, pushing the folder toward me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. You're not crazy. You were set up to lose. After he left, I read through every message. Every timestamp. Every detail that had been warped and twisted until Jenna saw me as the enemy. Couldn't sleep that night. Not because of what I learned, but because I couldn't stop asking myself something darker. Would she have still cheated, even without the push? And the scariest part? I didn't think I'd ever know the answer. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed with Elias's folder open on the nightstand, flipping through those screenshots over and over until the paper felt like it might catch fire from how tightly I was gripping it. Every word in those messages echoed louder than the one before it. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing how easy it had been for someone else to turn my wife against me, like I was some faceless villain she had to escape. But the next day, I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I went back to the house. Not to see her. She still hadn't reached out since dropping my things on the porch. I wasn't even sure if she was home. I just needed closure. Answers. And for some reason, I knew they weren't going to come from her lips. They were somewhere inside that house, waiting to be uncovered. I still had my key. She hadn't changed the locks. The place smelled like her shampoo the second I stepped inside. I tried not to let that bother me, but it did. Every little detail felt like a memory trying to drag me backward. I went upstairs and started digging through the attic where she kept her old art supplies. Jenna used to sketch everything. Street corners, hands, unfinished faces. She said it helped her process emotion when words failed. But she hadn't drawn much in the last year. Or at least I thought she hadn't. In the bottom of a cracked storage bin was one of her old leather-bound sketchbooks. The cover was warped with age, and a red ribbon bookmark poked out from the middle like a warning. I opened it. The early pages were harmless. Quick gesture drawings, concept layouts for murals she never finished, that kind of thing. But as I flipped closer to the middle, something changed. Her lines became harder, less graceful, angry strokes, jagged. There was a page with two figures, one small and hunched in the corner, the other standing tall with an exaggerated smile and blank eyes. The taller figure had my hair, my watch, my clothes, but the caption beneath the drawing read, "The version of him I can't talk to anymore." I felt something hollow in my stomach, like I'd just swallowed ice. The next page? Worse. It was a sketch of her, lying in bed, eyes wide open. Beside her was a scribbled-out figure, its face blacked out with ink. She'd written, "He's next to me, but I still feel alone." Page after page, drawing after drawing. Not of love, not of grief, but of distance. Emotional gaps she never told me about. In one, she drew a house with no windows. In another, a speech bubble hovering over an empty silhouette that read, "You always say the right thing too late." Then I reached the last page. It was different from the rest. Softer. A pencil drawing of two hands, hers and someone else's, fingertips barely touching. No faces, no setting, just a caption at the bottom. I didn't mean to fall, but he caught me when I was already halfway down. I sat in that attic for almost an hour, staring at that one page. Elias had shown me manipulation, strategy, someone else pulling strings. But this was her rawest truth. It wasn't a text. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession she didn't think anyone would find. And it hurt more than anything she ever said aloud. She had already left me long before she crossed the physical line. The worst betrayal wasn't her body. It was her silence. I closed the book, took a photo of that last page, left the original behind. I wanted to hate her, but all I felt was grief. A slow, aching grief for a woman who once used to draw me asleep on the couch, laughing. Now I was just a shadow with blank eyes in the corner of her mind. I walked out of that house for what I swore would be the last time. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. 3 days after I left the house for good, I was still living out of a duffel bag and rotating between cheap motels and the inside of my car. I wasn't homeless. I had places I could go. But I didn't want pity. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to answer the million versions of, "Are you okay?" Because the truth was, I didn't even know what okay meant anymore. So when I walked up to the front desk of the small motel I'd been using for the week and the receptionist handed me a white envelope, I almost told her she had the wrong guy. "Someone dropped it off for you earlier," she said. Didn't leave a name, just said it was urgent. There was no name on the envelope, just my first name, written in small neat letters, and stamped on the back. A return address from a neighborhood I recognized instantly. Talia's. My heart stopped for a second. Talia, the so-called friend, the puppet master in the shadows. I hadn't seen her since Elias dropped that folder off. But now she was suddenly back, leaving mysterious envelopes like some cliché villain. I took the envelope upstairs to my room, locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at it for a good 5 minutes. My hands were sweating. I didn't want to open it. I already knew it wasn't going to help. Nothing that came from her ever helped. But curiosity has a cruel way of pushing you over the edge. Inside was a handwritten note and a USB drive. The note was short. "You should see what she was saying about you behind closed doors, before she fell. You deserve to know the full picture. Don't trust either of us. Just look." No apology. No explanation. Just those words. Enough to reopen a wound I hadn't even finished bandaging. I didn't want to plug in the USB. Every part of me screamed that this was going too far, that knowing more wouldn't fix anything. But I did it anyway. I went to the motel lobby, asked to use their computer under some excuse about work documents, and popped it in. There were 3 folders. One titled Before Elias, another During, and the last one labeled Group Chat Deleted. I started with the first. Screenshots. Hundreds of them. Text messages from Jenna's group chats. Voice memos. Even diary entries that she must have typed out and shared with her circle of friends. The tone wasn't just frustrated or heartbroken. It was mocking. In one message, she wrote, "He still doesn't get it. He thinks showing up with flowers makes up for how boring he's become. I sit across from him at dinner and feel like I'm married to silence." In another, "Carter says he wants to talk things through again tonight. I might actually lose my mind. Can I just get credit for not screaming at him?" And worse, in a voice recording, she laughed and said, "If I ever do leave, he'll probably write a novel about it and call it betrayal. He thinks everything is deeper than it is." My face burned as I listened, as I read. Every word was a punch I hadn't seen coming. These weren't the words of a manipulated woman. These weren't confused emotions. This was cruelty. Casual, repeated cruelty. Dressed up as venting among friends. By the time I got to the group chat deleted folder, I already knew what I'd find. But nothing prepared me for the video. It was Jenna, in her car, recording herself on the day after our 5th anniversary. She looked tired, annoyed. She held up the bracelet I gave her that night. The one she said made her tear up. In the video, she laughed. "He still thinks I cried because it was beautiful. I cried because I knew I'd already checked out." I closed the video, pulled out the USB, thanked the receptionist without making eye contact, and walked out into the parking lot where the air suddenly felt too thick to breathe. It wasn't about Elias anymore. It wasn't about Talia. The truth was, I had already been erased from her heart long before I knew there was a threat. She hadn't fallen into an affair. She had planned her escape, and she'd been celebrating it behind my back. I didn't sleep the night I saw the video, not because I was broken anymore. I had already been through that storm, but because something shifted. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't asking why. I wasn't replaying conversations or trying to find the moment everything started to fall apart. I knew now the version of Jenna I had loved existed in the past, and the woman she became had let him die without a second thought. But that morning, something unexpected happened. An email from someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years, Marla, my old college roommate's sister. Back in the day, we were close. Nothing romantic, just those long 3 a.m. talks where two people who get the world differently find comfort in each other. Life happened, we drifted, as people do. But there her name was in my inbox. The subject line was simple. I heard what happened, and I'm sorry. Inside the message, she wrote that she'd seen one of Jenna's now deleted posts that made its way around their mutual circles. It was filled with half-truths, the kind that painted me as clingy, insecure, obsessive, the usual cocktail of post-breakup projection. Marla said she didn't believe a word of it, that she remembered how I used to speak about Jenna like she was the center of my universe, even when things weren't perfect. Then she said something that stuck with me. I always wondered why you disappeared, but I think now I understand. You were too loyal to someone who didn't know how to love you back. You didn't deserve that. And if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'm here. It was like a light cracked through the mess I'd been sitting in. I didn't reply right away, not because I didn't want to, but because for the first time since it all fell apart, I realized I had the option to move forward. Not with bitterness, not with some dramatic closure scene, but with honesty, with people who saw me, who remembered the version of me I lost along the way trying to hold onto someone who already let go. So yeah, I replied, and we talked. We've been talking. Nothing heavy, no expectations, just real, honest conversation with someone who makes silence feel comforting again, not like punishment. As for Jenna, I don't know where she is. I don't care anymore. I stopped checking. I stopped replaying. Her chapter is closed, not ripped out, just finished. And me? I'm not healed. Not yet. But I'm rebuilding. Quietly. On my own terms. With people who don't make me question if I'm too much or not enough. So if you're watching this right now, wondering whether walking away was the right choice, let me say this. If you have to beg someone to see your worth, they're not your home. Period. Thanks for staying with me through this story. And now I want to hear from you. What's the most surprising decision someone made in history? One that changed everything. Drop it in the comments. Let's talk about it. And don't forget, you're watching Reddit Confessions, where truth is louder than silence, and healing always begins with telling the story.